My name is Madison, and I am 26 years old. 3 months ago, my own sister shoved me out of my wheelchair in front of 60 guests at her engagement party, screaming that I was faking my disability for attention. The gasps from the crowd still echo in my nightmares. What happened next destroyed our family forever, but not in the way anyone expected. You see, when I hit that marble floor, something shattered that night, and it was not just my already damaged spine. It was the carefully constructed lie my family had been living for 8 years. The truth about my accident, about who was really driving that night, and about the inheritance everyone thought was lost forever, was about to surface in the most devastating way possible. Before we dive into this wild family betrayal story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and smash that like button if you are ready for some serious family karma. Subscribe, because this revenge story has more twists than a soap opera, and trust me, you will want to see how justice gets served cold. The engagement party was supposed to be Sophia's crowning moment. My sister had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. At 28, she was marrying Derek Hamilton, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Austin. The venue itself was a testament to their wealth, the Hamilton estate overlooking Lake Travis with its sprawling gardens and infinity pool that seemed to merge with the water beyond. I had been dreading this night for weeks. Ever since Sophia announced her engagement 6 months earlier, she had made increasingly cruel comments about my presence at family events. "Do you really need to bring that thing everywhere?" she would ask, gesturing dismissively at my wheelchair. "It makes people uncomfortable." My parents would shush her half-heartedly, but I could see the agreement in their eyes. In their perfect world, my disability was an inconvenience, a reminder of the tragedy that had derailed their picture-perfect family narrative. The accident happened when I was 18. I had been in my freshman year at UT Austin, finally free from the suffocating expectations of my family. Sophia was 20 then, working as a social media influencer and living off our parents' generosity. The official story was that I had been driving home from a college party, lost control on a rain-slicked road, and crashed into a tree. The impact had severed my spinal cord at L2, leaving me paralyzed from the waist down. For 8 years I had lived with the guilt of that night. My parents never said it outright, but their disappointment was palpable. I had thrown away my full scholarship, my promising future, my ability to give them grandchildren who could walk down an aisle or play sports. Sophia, meanwhile, became even more precious to them, their last hope for the family legacy they had always envisioned. At the engagement party, I tried to stay invisible, positioning my wheelchair in a corner near the gift table. I watched as Sophia floated through the crowd in her designer gown, her engagement ring catching the light from the crystal chandeliers. She looked radiant, untouchable, everything I would never be again. Derek's family welcomed her with open arms, clearly delighted that their son was marrying someone so beautiful and socially connected. The trouble started when Derek's grandmother, Eleanor Hamilton, approached me. She was a tiny woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of my late grandmother. "You must be Madison," she said, settling into the chair beside me. "I have heard so much about you." I was surprised. Sophia rarely mentioned me to her friends, much less Derek's family. "Really?" I asked, genuinely curious. Eleanor nodded, her expression growing serious. "Derek told me about your accident. Such a tragedy, especially since you were not the one driving." She patted my hand gently. "Your sister must carry such guilt knowing she was behind the wheel that night." The world stopped. The sounds of the party faded into white noise as Eleanor's words echoed in my head. "Your sister must carry such guilt knowing she was behind the wheel that night." I stared at her, my mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "I am sorry, did I say something wrong?" Eleanor asked, noticing my expression. Before I could respond, Sophia appeared beside us, her face pale. She had clearly overheard Eleanor's comment. "Grandma Eleanor," she said with forced cheer, "I see you have met my sister Madison." Eleanor smiled up at her. "Yes, I was just telling her how sorry I am about the accident." Derek mentioned that you were driving that night and how difficult it must be to live with that responsibility. Sophia's composure cracked for just a moment, but it was enough. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes, the way her hands trembled as she smoothed her dress. "Oh, Derek must have misunderstood," she said quickly. "Madison was driving. She lost control in the rain." But Eleanor was not easily fooled. She had been alive for 87 years, and she knew when someone was lying. Her eyes narrowed as she looked between us. "How strange. Derek was quite clear about the details. He said you told him you had been drinking at a sorority party and begged Madison to keep it secret because you would have lost your scholarship." The lie unraveled in that moment. I saw it all, the truth that had been hidden from me for 8 years. Sophia had been driving. Sophia had been drunk. Sophia had caused the accident that stole my future, and then she had let me believe it was my fault. Let me carry the shame, the guilt, the responsibility for destroying our family's dreams. I turned to look at my sister, this person I had idolized my entire life despite her cruelty. "Sophia," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the party noise. "Tell me she is wrong." But Sophia was already backing away, her perfect facade crumbling. Other guests were starting to notice our little drama, drawn by the tension crackling between us. "Madison, do not make a scene," she hissed. "Not tonight." That was when I lost it. 8 years of suppressed rage, of undeserved guilt, of watching my sister live the life that should have been mine, while I struggled with phantom pain and adaptive equipment erupted out of me. "Do not make a scene," I repeated, my voice rising. "You let me think I caused my own paralysis for 8 years." The confrontation that followed was ugly and public, exactly what Sophia had always feared. Guests gathered in a horrified circle as I demanded answers, my voice echoing across the marble floors of the Hamilton estate. Derek tried to intervene, but Eleanor held him back with a firm hand on his arm. This was family business, and it needed to be settled. "You are being dramatic," Sophia said, but her voice wavered. She looked around desperately for support from our parents, who were pushing through the crowd with expressions of mortification. "Madison has always had a flair for drama, especially when she is not getting enough attention." That word, attention, would be her downfall. Because in her desperation to maintain her lie, Sophia made the mistake that would destroy everything she had built. She decided to double down on the narrative that I was a attention-seeking invalid who could not accept that her own choices had consequences. "You want to know the truth?" Sophia said, her voice growing louder and more hysterical. "Fine. The truth is that Madison was driving drunk, just like everyone knows. She crashed the car because she was irresponsible and stupid, and now she spends her life in that wheelchair, making everyone else pay for her mistakes." The crowd gasped, but Eleanor was not finished. She pulled out her phone with the deliberate movements of someone who had lived through enough family secrets to know their value. "That is interesting," she said mildly, "because I have the police report right here. Derek emailed it to me when you first started dating, along with all the other background information our family requires." My parents had reached us now, my mother's face white with panic. She knew what was coming. They all knew, I realized with growing horror. Everyone except me had known the truth about that night. Eleanor read from her phone in a clear, carrying voice. "Driver identified as Sophia Marie Crawford, 20 years old. Blood alcohol content .14. Passenger Madison Rose Crawford, 18 years old, unconscious and critically injured. Driver admitted fault at scene, claimed full responsibility for crash." The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that massive ballroom. Every single guest, every member of both families, every photographer and catering staff member heard the truth that had been hidden for 8 years. I looked at Sophia, this stranger wearing my sister's face. "You let me think I did this to myself," I said, my voice breaking. "You let me hate myself for 8 years." "Madison, please," my mother said, stepping forward. "Not here, not now. We can discuss this at home." But I was past caring about propriety or family reputation. You all knew, I said, looking around at my parents, at the relatives who had gathered for this celebration. You all knew she was driving, and you let me believe I was responsible. My father, who had barely spoken to me since the accident, except to discuss medical bills and insurance claims, could not meet my eyes. We thought it was better this way, he said quietly. Sophia had her whole future ahead of her. You were already hurt. There was no point in destroying two lives. The cruelty of that logic hit me like a physical blow. There was no point in destroying two lives, so they had decided to sacrifice mine completely. Let me carry the guilt and shame, while Sophia got to play the tragic sister burdened with a disabled sibling but too noble to complain. Besides, Sophia added, desperate now, as she saw her perfect night dissolving around her, what does it matter now? You are fine. You have adapted. You have a good life. That was when she made her fatal error. As I sat there processing the magnitude of their betrayal, Sophia decided that the best defense was a good offense. She grabbed my wheelchair and started pushing me toward a corner away from the crowd. "Stop making everything about you," she shouted. "This is my night, my engagement party. I am so sick of you and your victim complex, always trying to steal attention with your fake disability." And then she did it. In front of 60 witnesses, including Derek's entire family and a photographer who caught every moment, Sophia grabbed my arms and physically lifted me out of my wheelchair, shoving me toward the floor. "Stop faking for attention," she screamed as I fell. The impact was devastating, not just physically, but emotionally. My tailbone hit the marble first, sending shockwaves of pain through my already damaged nerves. But worse than the pain was the humiliation, the absolute violation of being manhandled by someone who was supposed to love me. As I lay there on the cold floor looking up at the horrified faces surrounding me, something crystallized in my mind. This was not just about the accident anymore. This was about 8 years of systematic emotional abuse, of being gaslit and manipulated into believing I was the problem. This was about a family that had decided I was expendable the moment I became inconvenient. Derek was the first to move, rushing to help me back into my wheelchair while his grandmother called the police. Yes, the police. Because what Sophia had just done was not just cruel, it was assault. And it had happened in front of dozens of witnesses, many of whom were already posting about it on social media. "I did not mean it," Sophia was saying, but her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I just got upset. Madison knows how to push my buttons." But the damage was done. The engagement party was over, the guests were leaving in shocked silence, and Derek was looking at his fiancée like he had never seen her before. Because what kind of person physically attacks their disabled sister at their own engagement party? As the paramedics arrived to check on my injuries, and the police began taking statements, I realized something important. I was not the victim anymore. I was about to become the architect of the most spectacular family downfall Austin society had ever seen. The days following the engagement party felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. The video of Sophia pushing me out of my wheelchair had gone viral within hours, shared thousands of times across social media platforms, with hashtags like disability rights and family abuse. Local news stations picked up the story, and suddenly our family drama was entertainment for strangers across the country. But the viral video was just the beginning. Eleanor Hamilton had not just stumbled upon the truth about my accident. She had been investigating our family for months as part of their standard background checks for potential in-laws. What she discovered would unravel far more than just the lie about who was driving that night. 3 days after the party, Eleanor invited me to lunch at the Austin Country Club. I almost declined, embarrassed by all the attention and still processing the revelation about my accident, but something in her voice convinced me to go. When I arrived, she was waiting at a corner table with a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Madison," she said without preamble, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. What do you know about your grandmother's will?" My grandmother, Patricia Crawford, had died when I was 19, just a year after my accident. I had been so deep in depression and physical therapy that I barely remembered the funeral, much less any details about her estate. Not much, I admitted. I know she left everything to my parents. Why? Eleanor opened the folder and pulled out a stack of legal documents. Your grandmother left her entire estate, approximately $3.2 million, to you and your sister equally. The money was to be held in trust until you both turned 25 with your parents as trustees. I stared at her confused. That cannot be right. My parents told me she left everything to them. They said there was nothing for Sophia and me except some jewelry and personal items. That is what they told the court as well, Eleanor said grimly. But I have the original will right here along with bank records showing that your parents have been systematically draining the trust fund for 8 years. They have stolen over $2 million that belong to you and your sister. The documents Eleanor showed me painted a picture of financial fraud that was breathtaking in its scope and cruelty. My parents had used my grandmother's money to fund their lavish lifestyle, Sophia's designer wardrobe, and European vacations, even the down payment on their current house. Meanwhile, they had convinced me that I was a financial burden, that my medical expenses were bankrupting the family. But why are you telling me this? I asked, my head spinning from the implications. I mean, Sophia is your grandson's fiancée. This information could destroy her too. Eleanor's expression hardened. After what happened at that party, Derek has called off the engagement. What your sister did was unforgivable, but more than that, it revealed her true character. We cannot welcome someone into our family who is capable of such cruelty, especially knowing she has been complicit in covering up the truth about your accident. The revelation about Derek breaking up with Sophia should have given me some satisfaction, but I was still too shocked by the financial fraud to process it fully. $2 million. Money that could have paid for better medical care, adaptive equipment, maybe even experimental treatments. Money that could have given me independence and dignity instead of forcing me to live with parents who saw me as a burden. There is more, Eleanor continued. I hired a private investigator to look into your accident more thoroughly. The police report was sanitized Madison. Someone with influence made sure certain details were omitted from the official record. She handed me another set of documents, and my blood ran cold as I read them. Witness statements that were never included in the final report. Security camera footage from a nearby business that mysteriously disappeared. Most damning of all, text messages between Sophia and my father from the night of the accident discussing how to manage the situation and protect Sophia's future. The picture that emerged was of a carefully orchestrated cover-up. Sophia had indeed been driving drunk, but she had also been texting while driving, something that would have carried additional criminal charges. My father, a prominent local attorney with connections throughout the justice system, had used his influence to bury the evidence and shift blame to me. They let you take responsibility for your own assault, Eleanor said bluntly. Your sister did not just cause an accident, she committed vehicular assault while intoxicated, and your parents helped her cover it up at your expense. As I sat there in that exclusive country club surrounded by the trappings of wealth and privilege, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. For 8 years, I had blamed myself for destroying my family's happiness. I had accepted their resentment, their disappointment, their constant reminders that I was the reason their lives were not perfect. I had internalized their narrative that I was broken, burdensome, less than. But I was not the villain of this story. I was the victim of a conspiracy so cruel and calculated that it took my breath away. My own family had sacrificed me to protect Sophia's reputation and their own social standing. They had stolen my inheritance while making me feel guilty for existing. They had let me hate myself for something I had not even done. What can I do? I asked Eleanor, my voice steady for the first time in days. How do I make this right? Eleanor smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression that reminded me why the Hamilton family had dominated Austin business for 3 generations. Oh, my dear, she said, we are going to destroy them, legally, financially, and socially, and we are going to enjoy every minute of it. Over the next 2 hours, Eleanor laid out a plan that was both thorough and devastating. We would start with criminal charges against Sophia for the assault at the engagement party, something that was already in motion thanks to the police report filed that night. But that was just the opening move. The real destruction would come through civil litigation: elder fraud for stealing my grandmother's money, personal injury suits for the original accident and the recent assault, a defamation case for 8 years of character assassination. By the time we were finished, my parents would lose their house, their savings, and my father's law license. Sophia would face criminal charges and be financially ruined by civil judgments. But first, Eleanor said, "We need to secure your financial future. I am prepared to front the legal costs for all of this, but I want something in return." I waited, knowing there had to be a catch. Rich people did not help out of pure altruism. Derek has been devastated by all of this. He genuinely cared for your sister, and discovering her true nature has been a blow to him. But more than that, he feels guilty for being part of a family that could have prevented your suffering years ago if we had done our due diligence sooner. She paused, studying my reaction. Our family has always valued justice and accountability. We would like to offer you a position with our charitable foundation focusing on disability rights advocacy. The salary would be enough to ensure your independence, and the platform would give you a voice to help others in similar situations. It was not charity, I realized. It was restitution. The Hamilton family was offering me a chance to rebuild my life while also making amends for their indirect role in my family's deception. More importantly, it was offering me power, the kind of platform and resources I would need to ensure that what happened to me never happened to anyone else. "When do we start?" I asked. Eleanor's smile was sharp as a blade. "We already have. The fraud charges were filed this morning. Your parents should be getting served with papers right about now." The criminal charges against my parents hit Austin society like a nuclear bomb. Within 24 hours of the fraud allegations becoming public, my father's law firm issued a statement suspending him pending investigation. The local bar association launched their own inquiry into his professional conduct. Most satisfying of all, the country club where my parents had held membership for 15 years quietly suggested they might be more comfortable elsewhere. But Sophia's world collapsed even faster. The assault charges from the engagement party were just the beginning. Eleanor's private investigator had uncovered a pattern of behavior that painted my sister as something far worse than just a drunk driver who had panicked. She was a sociopath who had systematically destroyed my life to protect her own interests. The evidence was overwhelming. Text messages between Sophia and her friends joking about my disability. Social media posts where she complained about having to attend family events with the cripple. Most damning of all, a recorded phone conversation from 2 years earlier where she had told her then-boyfriend that she wished I had died in the accident so she wouldn't have to deal with the drama anymore. When Derek's family released that recording to the media, Sophia's carefully crafted image as a devoted sister caring for her disabled sibling disintegrated overnight. The influencer sponsors who had paid for her lifestyle dropped her immediately. The modeling agency that had represented her terminated her contract. Even her sorority sisters from college began distancing themselves publicly. The media attention was relentless. Local news stations ran investigative pieces about disability fraud and family abuse. National morning shows picked up the story as an example of how victims of accidents are often victimized again by their own families. Disability rights organizations rallied around my case, using it to highlight the broader issues of gaslighting and financial abuse within families. But the most devastating blow came when my cousin Jessica reached out to me. Jessica was my aunt's daughter, and she had always been close to our grandmother. When she saw the news coverage, she contacted me with information that would complete the picture of my family's betrayal. "Madison, I need to tell you something," Jessica said when we met for coffee downtown. "Your grandmother knew about the accident. She knew Sophia was driving." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean she knew?" Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me a video message my grandmother had recorded just weeks before she died. In it, she spoke directly to the camera, her voice weak but determined. If you are watching this, it means I am gone and something has happened to Madison's inheritance, she said. I know what really happened the night of the accident. I know Sophia was driving drunk, and I know she let Madison take the blame. I am changing my will to reflect this knowledge. Madison gets 75% of my estate, Sophia gets 25%, and their parents get nothing. They have proven they cannot be trusted to protect their children. The revised will was dated 3 days before my grandmother's death, but somehow it had never been submitted to probate court. Instead, my parents had produced an older version that split everything between them and made no mention of the trust funds for Sophia and me. She gave me this video and a copy of the real will, Jessica continued. She said if anything ever happened to make you question what you had been told about the accident, I should give these to you. I have been carrying this secret for 8 years, Madison. I am so sorry. The final will not only vindicated me, but revealed the full extent of my parents' greed. They had suppressed their own mother's final wishes to steal money from their disabled daughter. They had violated her trust as executors, her trust as parents, and her trust as human beings. With Jessica's evidence, our legal case became airtight. The district attorney's office upgraded the charges against my parents to include elder fraud and will tampering. Sophia faced additional charges for insurance fraud since she had filed false claims about the accident that resulted in higher payouts. The civil suits I filed would likely result in judgments exceeding $5 million. But money was not the only form of justice I sought. I wanted my family to experience the same kind of social humiliation and isolation they had subjected me to for 8 years. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to be completely alone, stripped of the relationships and status that had defined their identities. The Hamilton family's connections made this possible in ways I had never imagined. Within a week of the charges being filed, my parents found themselves blacklisted from every significant social institution in Austin. The hospital board my mother served on asked for her resignation. The charity gala my father had chaired for 5 years found a replacement. Their tennis partners at the country club stopped returning their calls. Sophia's isolation was even more complete. Her former friends were posting screenshots of her cruel messages about me competing to see who could distance themselves most dramatically from the scandal. The apartment she had been renting with my parents' money was reclaimed when their assets were frozen pending the fraud investigation. She had to move back into the family home just as it was being picketed by disability rights protesters. The irony was perfect. My family, who had always been so concerned with appearances and social status, had become Austin's most notorious outcasts. They were experiencing the same kind of rejection and judgment they had subjected me to, except theirs was entirely deserved. But the most satisfying moment came when Sophia showed up at my new apartment uninvited, 3 weeks after the engagement party that had started everything. I was living independently for the first time in my adult life, in a beautiful, accessible unit that Eleanor had helped me find. My new job with the Hamilton Foundation was giving me purpose and financial security I had never dreamed of. Sophia looked terrible. Her designer clothes had been replaced with discount store outfits. Her perfect hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Most telling of all, her confident posture had been replaced by the hunched shoulders and downcast eyes of someone who had been thoroughly defeated. "Madison, please," she said when I answered the door. "You have to call off the lawyers. Mom and Dad are going to lose everything. We will end up homeless." I looked at this person who had once seemed so powerful, so untouchable. The sister who had stolen my life, my money, and my dignity was now begging for mercy she had never shown me. "Do you remember what you said to me at your engagement party?" I asked quietly. "You told me to stop faking for attention. You said I had a victim complex." Sophia's face crumpled. "I did not mean it. I was just upset about the wedding drama. You know how I get when I'm stressed." "No," I said firmly. "You meant every word. And now you get to live with the consequences of who you really are." I closed the door on my sister for the last time, leaving her standing in the hallway with tears streaming down her face. 8 years earlier, she had made a choice to destroy my life to save her own. Now she would learn what it felt like to have someone else's choices determine her fate. The trial proceedings moved faster than anyone expected, largely because my family's legal team kept advising them to accept plea bargains rather than fight charges they could not possibly win. The evidence was simply too overwhelming, the media attention too intense, and their reputation too destroyed to mount any credible defense. My father was the first to break. Faced with the loss of his law license and potential prison time, he agreed to cooperate fully with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the full scope of their conspiracy, including details about bribing officials to suppress evidence and coaching Sophia on her false statements to police and insurance investigators. The most shocking revelation came when he admitted that they had considered having me declared mentally incompetent so they could control my portion of the inheritance permanently. They had actually consulted with doctors about having me committed to a long-term care facility, claiming my depression and trauma from the accident had left me unable to manage my own affairs. "We thought it would be better for everyone," my father said during his deposition, his voice barely above a whisper. Madison was so depressed, so angry about her condition. "We thought professional care would help her, and it would eliminate the financial burden on the family." The casual way he discussed stealing my freedom along with my money was chilling. These people had been prepared to have me institutionalized rather than face the consequences of their actions. They had viewed me not as their daughter and sister, but as an obstacle to be removed. My mother's breakdown was more dramatic, but equally satisfying. When confronted with evidence of her role in the cover-up, she collapsed during questioning and had to be hospitalized for what her lawyers claimed was a nervous breakdown. But Eleanor's investigators discovered she had been researching how to fake mental illness to avoid criminal prosecution, including internet searches for symptoms of various psychological disorders. The judge was not impressed with her performance. When she returned to court claiming she could not remember key events due to her trauma, the prosecution presented her browser history showing she had been shopping for luxury handbags and planning a European vacation just days before her supposed mental collapse. But it was Sophia's trial that drew the most public attention. The assault charges from the engagement party were just the beginning. She was also facing felony charges for insurance fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Her legal team tried every strategy they could think of, from claiming she had been coerced by our parents to suggesting she had been too young to understand the consequences of her actions 8 years earlier. None of it worked. The jury watched the viral video of her pushing me from my wheelchair, listened to the recorded phone conversation where she wished I had died, and read transcript after transcript of her cruel messages about my disability. When her own defense attorney asked her to apologize during closing arguments, she could not even manage to sound sincere. The verdicts came down like dominoes. My father received 2 years in federal prison for fraud and another year in state prison for conspiracy. His law license was permanently revoked. My mother got 18 months in federal prison and lost her nursing license. Both of them were ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties, which meant they would be financially ruined even after serving their sentences. Sophia's sentence was the harshest: 3 years in state prison for the assault and fraud charges, plus 5 years probation. The judge specifically noted that her complete lack of remorse and her history of cruelty toward a disabled family member warranted the maximum penalty. She would also owe me over $2 million in civil damages, money she would never be able to pay. But prison was not the worst part of their punishment. The real consequences would last long after they served their time. My father would never practice law again. My mother would never work in healthcare. Sophia would never recover her social media career or modeling opportunities. They had lost not just their freedom and money, but their entire identities and futures. The day Sophia was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom gallery surrounded by my new support system: Eleanor Hamilton, my cousin Jessica, advocates from the disability rights organizations who had rallied around my case, and my therapist who had helped me process 8 years of trauma and gaslighting. As I watched my sister being led away in handcuffs, I felt something I had not experienced since before the accident: complete and total peace. The local news coverage that night focused on the broader implications of the case. Legal experts discussed how the prosecution had set new precedents for holding family members accountable for disability abuse. Disability rights advocates used the outcome to push for stronger protections for vulnerable adults. Even the medical community began examining how healthcare providers could better identify and report signs of family-based financial abuse. But for me, the most meaningful coverage came from a blog post written by a woman whose own family had gaslit her about a workplace injury. She wrote about how watching my case had given her the courage to speak up about her own situation. Within days, her post had been shared thousands of times by people with similar experiences: disabled individuals whose families had stolen from them, manipulated them, or convinced them they were burdens. My story had become bigger than just my family's crimes. It had become a rallying cry for anyone who had been told their worth was determined by their ability to conform to other people's expectations of normalcy. It had given a voice to victims who had been silenced by shame and isolation. The financial settlements were substantial enough to ensure my long-term security. The original inheritance plus interest and penalties came to over $4 million. The civil judgments against my family added another $3 million, though I knew I would never see most of that money since they had no assets left to seize. But the amount mattered less than the principle. They would spend the rest of their lives in debt to me, a daily reminder of the cost of their cruelty. More importantly, I now had the resources to build the life I should have had all along. A beautiful, fully accessible home with adaptive technology that gave me independence I had never experienced. A career that was meaningful and financially rewarding. Access to medical care and equipment that improved my quality of life dramatically. Most importantly, the knowledge that I was not the broken, burdensome person my family had convinced me I was. The last piece of business was deciding what to do with the family home where I had spent 8 years being slowly destroyed by people who were supposed to love me. The house would be sold to pay restitution, but I had the option to buy it myself at the auction price. I chose to let it go. There was nothing in that house worth preserving. No happy memories that had not been tainted by the knowledge of how my family really saw me. Instead, I arranged for the disability rights organizations that had supported me to receive the proceeds from my share of the sale. They would use the money to help other families in similar situations, ensuring that my suffering would prevent someone else's. 2 years have passed since that terrible night at Sophia's engagement party, and I am writing this from my office at the Hamilton Foundation for Disability Justice, an organization that grew out of Eleanor's original foundation, but now focuses specifically on legal advocacy and support for disabled individuals facing family abuse. My life today is unrecognizable from the existence I had before the truth came out. I wake up each morning in a home I own surrounded by adaptive technology that makes my daily routine efficient and comfortable. I drive to work in a car equipped with hand controls, something my parents had always claimed was too expensive and unnecessary. Most importantly, I am surrounded by people who see my wheelchair as simply one aspect of who I am, not the defining characteristic that makes me a burden or an embarrassment. The foundation work has been more fulfilling than I ever imagined possible. We have helped over 200 families navigate situations involving financial abuse, guardianship fraud, and medical gaslighting. Our legal clinic provides free services to disabled individuals whose families are exploiting them, and our advocacy work has resulted in stronger protections being written into state law. Eleanor Hamilton has become the grandmother I never really had, someone who celebrates my achievements and supports my independence without making me feel like I owe her gratitude for basic human decency. Derek, surprisingly, has become one of my closest friends. His guilt over his family's initial failure to investigate Sophia more thoroughly has motivated him to become a passionate advocate for our cause. He jokes that I am the sister he actually wanted all along. My relationship with my extended family has been complicated but healing. Jessica and several of my cousins have worked hard to rebuild connections with me, acknowledging their own role in enabling my parents' behavior by staying silent when they suspected something was wrong. We are learning together what healthy family relationships look like when they are based on genuine care rather than obligation or social expectations. As for my immediate family, they have become strangers to me in the most liberating way possible. My father served his full sentence and was released 6 months ago. He works now as a paralegal for a small firm that handles traffic tickets and minor criminal cases, a far cry from the prestigious corporate practice he once ran. My mother got out of prison last year and works part-time at a retail pharmacy, having lost her nursing credentials permanently. They live in a small apartment across town and have made no attempt to contact me. Sophia was released 3 months ago after serving her full sentence. The woman who once commanded social media followings in the hundreds of thousands now works at a call center and lives with a roommate in a studio apartment. Her probation officer contacts me periodically to confirm she is staying away from me as required by her restraining order. I am told she has gained weight, lost her confidence, and speaks to almost no one at work. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel sorry for them. They lost everything: their money, their status, their freedom, their family relationships. They went from being pillars of Austin society to cautionary tales whispered about at country club dinners. But then I remember the 8 years I spent hating myself because of their lies, and I feel nothing but satisfaction that justice was finally served. The most unexpected gift from this entire experience has been romantic love. Last year, I met David through a professional conference on disability advocacy. He is a civil rights attorney who specializes in discrimination cases, and he had followed my case in the legal journals. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours, and by the end of it, I knew I had found someone who understood not just my work, but my journey. David has never known me as anything other than the strong, confident woman I became after discovering the truth about my family. To him, my wheelchair is not a tragedy or an inconvenience. It is simply part of the package that includes my intelligence, my sense of humor, my passion for justice, and my hard-earned wisdom about human nature. We are planning to move in together next month, another milestone in my journey toward complete independence. The question I get asked most often during interviews and speaking engagements is whether I have forgiven my family. People seem to expect that my story should end with some kind of reconciliation, a recognition that they were flawed but still family, an acknowledgement that love should triumph over justice. But I have learned that forgiveness does not require reconciliation, and love does not require accepting abuse. I have forgiven my family in the sense that I no longer carry anger about their actions. That rage has been transformed into motivation for my advocacy work. But I will never have a relationship with them again because they have proven themselves to be fundamentally unsafe people who cannot be trusted with my well-being. The family I have built for myself, Eleanor, David, Jessica, my colleagues at the foundation, the friends I have made through my work, is infinitely more loving and supportive than the biological family that raised me. These people chose to be in my life, and I chose them. We are connected by mutual respect and genuine affection rather than obligation and shared DNA. My story has become part of a larger movement to redefine how society thinks about disability, family loyalty, and personal worth. I speak regularly at conferences and universities about the intersection of disability rights and family abuse. My book about the experience became a bestseller and has been optioned for a television miniseries. Most importantly, the legal precedents set by my case have been used to prosecute similar crimes across the country. But beyond all the professional success and public recognition, the most meaningful aspect of my current life is simply the peace I feel each day. I no longer question my worth or my right to exist as I am. I no longer carry guilt for circumstances beyond my control. I no longer accept cruelty disguised as love or manipulation disguised as care. The girl who once blamed herself for her own assault has become a woman who refuses to accept anything less than the respect and dignity every human being deserves. The family that tried to erase me has been erased from my life instead. And the justice that seemed impossible for 8 long years has been served completely and permanently. If you have made it this far in my story, I want to ask you something important. Have you ever questioned whether the people in your life who claim to love you actually treat you with love? Have you ever wondered if the guilt and shame you carry about your circumstances might not actually belong to you? Have you ever suspected that your family's version of events might not be the whole truth? Because if any part of my experience resonates with you, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve people in your life who celebrate your strength rather than exploit your vulnerabilities. You deserve relationships based on genuine care rather than control. And most importantly, you deserve to know that your worth as a human being is not determined by other people's ability to accept and support you. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when you had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being. Hit that like button if this story gave you something to think about, and subscribe, because I will be sharing more stories about finding justice and building chosen families. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they are not crazy, they are not the problem, and they deserve so much better than they have been accepting. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to carry other people's shame. Sometimes justice takes 8 years, but it always comes for those who deserve it. And sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build for yourself, one relationship at a time.